All right, all right, all right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Glide Next for the launch of our SQL data sources. This is a long time coming, and I'm really excited about this one. So, if you could please drop in the chat, let us know where you're watching from. And I got to ask, how do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it SQL or do you pronounce it SQL? I feel like I have these back and forths all the time with folks about what's the right way to say it. All right. Hey everyone, I'm Andy Claremont, your head of community here at Glide, and welcome to Glide Next, where we're sharing what's new and what's coming to Glide. And we're keeping an eye on the chat, so please drop your questions in and we'll get to them at the end. Now, for our agenda today, we're going to do some quick intros here and a little recap of what we've been working on over the last year or so. We'll talk about what's coming with Glide and SQL data sources. And following that, we're going to do a lovely live demo with our special guest, Yasin Hassanien from Voktech. And I probably mispronounced that again, but Yasin, I expect you to correct me once you jump on. And then we'll get to the Q&A at the end. So for those of you who haven't heard and haven't seen our previous sessions, we declared 2023 to be Glide's year of power. And it's been going pretty well so far. Early on in the year, we added new large-scale data sources. We made Glide apps responsive to work across all devices. We introduced new custom action workflows and native integrations so you can connect your Glide apps to other tools and services that you're already using. And then we introduced Call API. So if there's a tool or a service that you want to use Glide with, and it has an API, but we don't have a native integration for it, you can use Call API in your data or in your actions to connect with those services. And then most recently, including what we shared at No Code Summit in Paris a few weeks back, we launched Glide AI. So you can add AI features without worrying about model configuration or performance optimization. So it's been pretty good. We've done a lot of things this year, and something that I'm really excited about as we're coming to the end of 2023 is that we are kind of circling back to where we started with SQL and large volume data sources. And this is something that we've wanted to do for a while, adding support for larger data sources. And it's something that our users and customers have been asking for, especially the larger teams who have SQL data in production. And I'm excited to say that now it's here in beta for our enterprise teams. So as of right now, you can connect Glide to MySQL, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server, and Google Cloud SQL. So how does this actually work? So here's a very high-level run-through. You're going to set up your connection to your SQL Server. Once that connection has been set up, you can then go in to your database tables and add those full SQL tables as read-write data sources in the Glide editor. And they're going to show up alongside other tables so you can work with them just like you would be working with any of the other data sources. The other thing you can do is write custom SQL queries so you can pull read-only data into your data sources. And then from there, you can do things like building other tables that pull from these ones. You can extend those read-write columns with computed columns and integrations. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do now with the addition of SQL data sources. Another little note here is that your SQL data isn't actually stored in Glide. What's happening is that Glide is running a query against your data source and loading those results up in your app. Now, this happens when you're looking at data in the data editor, so when you're in the builder, and it also happens when your users are looking at that data in your app. Now, if you want to refresh that data, you can do it manually with the reload query action. So that is it in a nutshell in terms of how do you work with SQL. Now, it's one thing for me to prattle on about this. It's another thing to actually bring somebody in and show this live in action. So I'd love to bring on Yasin from Voktech, one of our Glide agency partners, to show us a little bit more.
Hey,
Before we get into that, though, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at Voktech?
yes. So I'm the CEO of Voktech. I founded the company around 11 years ago. So we're specialized in business automation, where we are taking care of spotting out the issues in companies where they don't know what to do exactly with it when it comes to digital. Then we automate the processes where we can take administrative processes into robotics. So now we integrate. There are a lot of software as service apps in the market. So what we do is exactly we give them consultation on what exactly they should use, what tools can go with which one, and most likely what's better from what exactly, because you have a lot of apps to compare. So this is our position mainly, which comes in the digital transformation. I come from a hard code background for some time, more than 22 years right now in experience. And then now I spend most of my time in the low code. It's better, it's easier, it's faster. You can deploy a lot of things. It's saving a lot of time for a lot of new developers who's coming into the field. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Yeah.
And you've been doing a lot with SQL in our alpha, and now that we're in beta, I see all the stuff that you're posting in the beta group. That's amazing. Thank you for that. What are you going to be showing us today?
Yeah. So today we're going to go through a demonstration of how you can connect SQL to your Glide, play around with the SQL data once you show it off, talk about the SQL exactly and what kind of servers that you can jump in. There is something that I want you to understand, guys. So some of the people, might think about SQL. This is something might be difficult to be starting on and go on. But let me just talk to you about the low code and no code competition right now. So since I'm coming from a hard code, seeing the low code is developing every day and now and then. Up until this moment, the tools are available in the market who's connected to scalable databases is very limited. And Glide is bringing up, I think, a turnkey point in the field. So the thing, but you're going to start with the low code, you're going to have always the limitations where you're always going to have like row limits, like what is introduced in Glide tables. And also when Glide started with Google Sheet, whenever you go over 50,000 rows or 100,000 rows, the Google Sheet is going to be very heavy to be used. So you're going to end up eventually wanting no limits. That's the thing. And the answer is not going to be otherwise from the SQL. So SQL is a common language where most of the big databases are using so far. And Glide started with BigQuery, but unfortunately the BigQuery is only a read-only source where you can have analytics, big data, up to petabyte data to be stored. However, what we always requested from Glide, and thankfully they brought it up, which is a data source with a no limit and also an easy to be read and write source. So we can immediately punch in the data and just be sent to our databases. So I prepared a little bit of a demo, as you can see here. This is like a restate demo, a simple app with multiple tables between a Glide normal table here, as you can see, and also one of the SQL tables. So most recently in this year, Glide brought up something called the integration, where you can have it here in an easy way. You really can integrate with many apps in the external world. And in an easy way, you can just hop on and just integrate the SQL, whether you're going to host your SQL server in Google or just have a self-hosted SQL, or just go to simple platforms such as Neon we're going to talk about today. So the most important part in Glide is not only just making sure that you're going to have a lot of things going back and forth when it comes to moving data from limited data sources up until something that really can be scaled and also can be connected to the outer world. So an example here, what you can see here in Neon, this is just a serverless server where you can go up to Neon and sign it up and just write down your username, and that's it. The connection is going to be easy. We can talk about the connection more and more in details. You can just use the Django as a connection and just going to give you the details. You're going to just hop on in Glide and just add these there. Once you just integrate it, then things are going to be there. So let me just refresh the builder right now, just let it here for some time. So once your data is ready, everything is going to be for you ready to be able to be integrated within the Glide data source. Okay, so let's go here. Yep. Yeah. So here's the integration. It's just simple, straightforward integration. It's going to ask you about the connection. Glide made something beautiful recently. They added multi-sources integration within the Postgres and the Cloud SQL as well. So as you can see here, you can add more than one database to one application. And that's what I love about Glide. So Glide is always an excellent front end for the data sources where you combine them all together. It's just simple. After the integration, when you go there into SQL, then you choose your Postgres. You don't have to write or remember the tables. You're just going to view it here, and you can find any table is going to be created there. So once you just select your table, it's going to be added immediately to Glide, and it's going to act as if it's a normal table that we are used to be having in our data editor. The best thing, so SQL has been there for a very long time. So what is different between having a SQL in Glide and having a SQL somewhere else where you can view your data? So as you can see, Glide, they have a lot of features that you can have it in the builder, where you can integrate AI integrations, computed columns, something like the template column that I love, where you can just add it here. When I go to an example here in the SQL table, I'm just going to add here, just try to make sure to map anything that is available in the SQL and just play around with it, whether to replace, whether to add, whether even doing some of the math equations that can be done within Glide. So it's like a simple, easier way where you can have the data stored somewhere and you can do kind of like relations, computation, anything within the Glide, so the users are going to be presented with a better UI and so on. So what we have right now here is just a simple table that I created before we start on with this demonstration. In a simple way, it's kind of an ID table, which is, we can have row ID in Glide tables, and SQL, it has to have an ID as well. So you have two ways where you can add your table. Either you're going to select it, what I've just done right now in front of you guys by selecting in from the dropdown, or going to the custom query here and just right here, select from the table name that we're having in our servers. So as you can see here, Neon, this is the table that I just created in Neon, and I'm just gonna call it here in Glide. See how fast it is? It's like in a splash. So what happens, it brings for me the table. I'm gonna see the columns in front of me, and then just give it a name, just custom query, and then just go there. And thanks to Andy, he just mentioned that you can even write a custom query because you need to overcome a lot of some kind of limitations that you might have in Glide, and we're going to talk about this kind of limitations. So as you can see here, I'm selecting the ID as this is the ID of the SQL table I'm just going to be added, and you can see the table is being added in a very fast way. And I'm going to use this by adding a relation here in a simple way by relating this table to any other column available within Glide. So you're not limited only to relations in SQL. You are able to be using the Glide table and GPT as well, or BigQuery if you have BigQuery. Some of the other sources are available, like SQL servers from Microsoft, MySQL. Personally, I prefer Postgres. I'm gonna talk about why I prefer it. So it's kind of like a preference, but some of the companies already have their data available on any kind of ready-made systems that on SQL or any other data sources. Most of them, you're gonna see them at the end appear for you as a table in Glide. That's the beauty out of it. So you can connect whatever you want. You don't have to move your data from a server to another and so on. So there are like tips and tricks that you have to understand very, very well. You're not gonna use SQL and that's it. This is, hey, that's my gonna be the future user table, and this is something that I'm gonna build all of my data on and so on. There are some limitations on the SQL, which is you have to make sure to understand before building your app. And some of the people, they say, hey, it's gonna need an experience. It's not gonna need expert. So my answer in a simple way, hey, this is ChatGPT. You just go talk to ChatGPT, brainstorm with ChatGPT, and that's it. So all of your issues that you're gonna think of or brainstorm before building your app, you're just gonna go to ChatGPT, build with the ChatGPT whatever you want, think it out loud, and ChatGPT is gonna give you, as a beginner, what to do exactly. Even if I went to ChatGPT, hey, create for me, as an example, for me, a Postgres table for a to-do list, just it. So what happens right now, ChatGPT is gonna give me the query, what's gonna be exactly the table with the schema, what we call it the schema, which is, what is this column for, which column is the IT, and so on. So even it's gonna give you an explanation of what exactly this column is gonna be for you beside each column that is being created. So once you just take out, hey, this is the copy, I'm gonna go to here, I'm just gonna go to my SQL editor, just add whatever I had from ChatGPT, and that's it, play. So as you can see, the table is gonna be created in a very simple way. This is the to-do list. It didn't take a second. This is with Neon. The same concept is gonna be there from Google Cloud SQL, Postgres, which is gonna be self-hosted somewhere, whatever you want. So it's an easy code that's going to be written there. If you want to modify anything, you can just go back to ChatGPT. Hey, add another column where you can add another column for owner, as an example. So immediately ChatGPT will rewrite for you the query. So that's the thing. See, before AI, yeah. When someone says, hey, SQL is kind of like, man, it's a lot of codes to be written and so on, and we're dealing with low-code apps and so on. But currently in 2023, with the help of ChatGPT or any AI, even Bard can write for you any queries. So the easiness of what to do exactly with it is going to be easier. So let me tell you my experience with Glide, because I started with them almost right now 3 years. These guys are trying their best to always break the limits of the data. And this is something was in their goal since day one, because I was like, when I started with Glide, hey, 25K is not going to be enough for me, man. We're going to rely on this like a day-to-day operation. We're going to write comments, activities, etc., etc. At some point, guys, we have to have something. So they started to bring up slowly what is going on, and they are trying to make sure to have the same experience that you always have with building the app, because this is one of the most important goals, is building an app in a very short time, keeping the same knowledge that you guys have, and you don't have to like learn a lot of complicated stuff to be able to bring something to life. So when they introduced GPT and BigQuery, there are a lot of things that kind of like a limitation for you. And sometimes when it comes to loading time to the users, then you're gonna have an easiness with SQL, not with anything else. Like what Andy said, when Glide runs the query, it's not going to be mirrored in Glide. So it's going to bring your data from your server immediately to Glide. And this is how we are seeing here in the table. So whenever I click a reload here, it's just bringing up the data directly from there. Once it's ready, I can just add anything to be done with, like adding data to it, like manipulating, editing data, whatever I have from my options. So as you can see here from the form, this is an add show form. It's a simple form where you can choose the SQL immediately from there. But take care, when it comes to read-only tables, you're not going to have any entry columns or entry components. So the entry component is going to be always there only on the writable tables. So some people will say, hey, why we're going to have a read-only table? I'm just going to go to this point very soon. I'm going to tell you why. So as you can see here, this is the ID where you can add here the name. So testing as an example, and the value, 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to use the columns like I always use, like the unique ID if I want to add it in the back end. But if it's a serial ID, it's going to be added automatically. Once it's hitting the submit, you're going to have a success notification, and immediately will add it to the table, as you can see here in the row. This is now stored in SQL. It's not stored in Glide. Let me just tell you this again. This is now stored in SQL, and there is a very big difference. So there are like tricks that you need to do when you're dealing with SQL. Currently, my experience is whenever I build anything in SQL, I don't do aggregations in Glide. What I do is how to like create an aggregation in the server itself and having it as a view. So see, now this is the test. Test is a view from the original table. A view is a read-only table where you can combine a lot of things together, like, you know, concat or adding strings together, aggregation, adding any kind of strings together, like first name and last name. So in Glide, it's easier to be added here, like a full name example here in this column, and then just choose here a template column like we always used to, and then say, hey, this is the F, which is first name, and this is the last, where the last name is, and F, and last, and here you go. I'm just gonna select it from here, and this is the last name. So in GPT, you're gonna have a limitation. You can build, yes, computation, but you are not gonna be able to filter them out, because the GPT are only gonna be allowing you where you can have whatever filtered, what exactly is stored in your server. Same thing with BigQuery, same thing with SQL. So when it comes also to aggregation, like building a like 1+2 math column, it's not going to be easier. If you're going to use the computed column, yes, it's going to be a result where you can present it for your users on the app. But what if you want to have like a full table calculation? So it's better to create your calculation on the server side rather than doing it in Glide. So performance is better because you don't have to let Glide go to the server, then come back, bring the data, then do the computation, then go back to the server, rolling up, and so on. But in this case, if you created views in SQL on your servers, so the performance of your servers, it's all in the same schema. So it's kind of like a milliseconds. The calculation is going to happen in a very easy way. And then it's going to get you to something called the indexing and speed performance and so on. But this is kind of like an advanced stage where these kind of questions going to be answered in the community later. So in a very brief way, what I'm trying to demonstrate here to make it as simple as possible. From my point of view, SQL is way, way better than any kind of source. GPT, yes, it's something for you to have tens of millions of rows, but still, you're going to come in at a moment where you can, like, let's say you want to update every row that has a male, as an example, in the gender column that has a male. Let's say, hey, change them from a male to a female. You're dealing with like thousands of rows. This is not going to be able to be as fast as soon as the SQL, where you can write one query sentence and just a schema that's going to be written there in just a millisecond. Everything will be changed in as soon as you hit enter. But in Glide, you're going to have a lot of limitations where you want to change this kind of amount of data. This is something that we've faced with other data, because when you're dealing with millions of data, you have to keep loading a lot of rows. As you can see here, once I have the form added, everything is ready. I can just have my read-only table listed in a list, as you can see here, and just choose the data source and have my custom query, which is written. Just add the ID, the name, and the value. As easy as it is. If I'm going to edit it, there are like tips and tricks. This is a read-only. So I have some kind of like a workaround where I have a relation. As an example here, it's going to be connected to the writable table. This is just a workaround where you guys, like, if you want to have a read-only table, then you can just connect it with the ID, whatever you have here in the writable table, and from it, you can just view it from outside. This is something that you're going to need a lot, by the way, when you're using SQL. The reason, because if you're going to build your custom complicated or complex queries, yes, you're going to view it to the user, but at a certain point, you need him to edit as well the data. See? So Glide now recognizes that there's a writable relation, and you just add edit here, and it's going to open for you the edit entries. So as Andy said, the SQL currently is not a real-time synchronization with all the users. So there are like also other ways to overcome this for the time being. So in Glide, not BigQuery, not GBT, in Glide, so we're having the data immediately appears on every user's device. So if I'm sitting with you, we're on my mobile, if I've done any kind of action, added any kind of data, immediately it's going to appear at Andy's phone as an example, because in Glide table, it's kind of like a real-time thing. However, in GBT, SQL, big table, it's not real-time. Maybe Glide is going to work in the future for something for that, but for the current time, the limitation is going to be using the reload query where you can have in the action. So what you're going to do is, once the edit is done here, you're just going to go use the reload action here for the user as well, because you want to reload as well the read-only table, because this is the one you're showing to the screen to the user side. And once you hit submit here, as you can see, the action for the reload is going to be there. You're going to play with whatever integration you're going to have, whether you're going to use any other integrations, which this is something that I want to show you guys. So why do I prefer SQL? So first of all, freedom. You play with your data as much as you want. This is number one. Number two, in Postgres, as an example, from my point of view, you can connect the database itself with anything else in the world, because you're going to reduce a huge amount of latency. So some of the companies, they have, their SQL servers, they have entry fields from separate platforms or grabbing data from somewhere. Let's say an example, in our case, sometimes from Google Analytics, wherever you have your website, data analytics, and so on, these are stored even in SQL or BigQuery. It depends on how you are managing your data warehouse. So if you have the SQL server, then everything is going to be managed from the server side. This is, while dealing with data, is very, very important for you when it comes to big bunch of amount of data. When it comes to 20,000 data row in Glide, yeah, that's a 20K at the end. But you were talking about millions of rows. Data is going to be like aging. As far as I understand, there is nothing called unlimited, but it depends on your resources. If you have that big amount of resources in your SQL, it can store up to petabyte of data. And it will require for you some of the play around with the indexing and so on. So I'm just going to show you the popular platform like Make and Zapier. This is something that we're always using with Glide. As you can see, everything can be used from SQL, where you can inject the data to SQL and grab the data back from SQL immediately if you want to view it somewhere else. Because in Glide is going to always give you the API only on Glide table or Glide GPT. But in the SQL servers, you manage your data on your own, whether you're going to add import data or like export data and so on. This is something that you have to take care from your own side. So as you can see here, you can delete the row, execute a function, execute a query, insert, and so on. So why I brought this now, one of the most important parts is for many times we requested a lot of features. One of them is the most important one. Let's say I want to push multiple rows in the table. So the only way to be done, you can see and follow in the community, a lot of people are suggesting to use Make, where you can like split the rows and inject the 10 to 12 rows immediately using the API from Glide and so on. But in our case, you're just going to execute one query line. And this query line is going to be done either with Zapier or using the Make. Whatever you guys have because I know a lot of people, they prefer sometimes Zapier because it's easier, or Make, it's up to you in the end. It's just one query that where you can inject a multiple data rows. Sometimes I push, by the way, thousands of rows in one action. And the server is going to take it, because what you do is you're talking to the data and the server directly. There is nothing in the middle. So the latency is kind of like very, very fast for you. And the second thing is connecting your database with anything in the world. Sometimes I know that some of you guys started with Google Sheet with Glide, and you're thinking of, hey, I wanna, what do you suggest? Shall I like keep my data in Google Sheet? Shall I start with SQL now, and so on? My suggestion is, whenever you're ready, your data can be exported from Google Sheet, and then you can keep your data in Google Sheet and also connect the Postgres on Zapier as an example. Whenever a row is added, it's gonna synchronize with your Google Sheet all the time. So because some of us in their companies, they're like these finance guys that they like always to use Google Sheet. They want to use formulas. They want to use their own chart. They want to play with the columns. They want to play with the data around. So it's easier also to synchronize from SQL to the Google Sheet and so on. From the whole, preference, what I prefer, where do you start your SQL server? Is it with Neon? Is it with like a self-hosted in your own server on GoDaddy or anywhere else, or on Google? My preference is always by Google Cloud, and there is a reason for it. The reason for Google Cloud is there is like an ecosystem that Google have built. This is something that I've always wanted to share with the community. So Google, they have everything connected together. Because we started with Glide with a lot of Google Sheet. So still up until today, we have Google Sheet has been built. They are limited in the data, like just thousands of rows. I don't have to move them to any other sources. But the thing is, I need them all also sometimes to be done in a big query, as an example, just to have my data analytics. We have charts in Glide. Yes. We have also the different type of charts and images and so on, and the calculation, the big numbers and so on. But still, we need more. So there is something called the Looker Studio. Looker Studio is a tool where Google is having a free to be used by any Gmail account. And if you have also a Google Workspace account, you can just hop in and view your SQL data directly with immediately the Looker Studio. What we call it a business intelligence. And you have reports, comparison, advanced analytics, because at the time you will always be needing something more when it comes to reports. As you can see, all of these are data sources that is available, and BigQuery is one of them, of course, and SQL is another one. So if you have a MySQL or PostgreSQL, even Microsoft SQL Server, you can have all of them available in one reporting system. As you can see here, you can guys just go to the YouTube. You can find here a lot of people talking about it, how you can build a Looker Studio. It's like a very powerful way where you can have a good analytics for your business decision makers. So this is what I love about SQL. And I remember I asked Mark like a while ago, hey, Mark, would like to have the GPT available in Looker Studio or something where I can grab my data. He just said me, hey, wait. There is something coming on. So they were building the SQL. Yeah, they were building the SQL. And it was like for me, hey, that's a surprise for me, but thank you. And this is the most important part. I go with Google when it comes to GCP, because the most important part, there is something called the federated queries, where you can, from BigQuery itself, you can run your own queries on SQL directly to your BigQuery, which is a win-win situation if you are used to this. I know that some of you guys, hey, you're talking a lot of chemistry. Hey, I'm just used to Glide, just add columns, remove, and computation within Glide, using Glide AI and so on. Yes, but hey, after some time, you're gonna need more experience. You're gonna have something like curiosity. Hey, I wanna go for more. So yeah, these are the tools that you're gonna play with in the future. And combining them all in one place is something that is gonna be great for you. Some other trick also as well that I use always is the web view. So if you guys have the web view here component, you can just sometimes add here even the Looker Studio from Google, where you don't have to let your user go outside the application itself. Within the application, they can view the reports when they are on a laptop, and it's going to be shown here instead of this one. It's just very simple, ecosystem where you can connect everything together. So the other thing is here where you can use from SQL, there is something called the PG admin. And is it all about creating tables by the same way I just did, like what ChatGPT done with me? See, when it comes to SQL queries, it's always better to, play with this. Editing your schema, altering your tables, modifying, creating custom queries and so on, creating views even. It's better to use this methodology. But if you are finding it difficult, even if ChatGPT is building with you, you can just go to PG Admin 4. This is an open source tool where you can connect your databases as well, and immediately you can just use the front GUI that these guys have built. You can just add your column, build your schema, because up until now, it's not supported to add any extra columns within Glide. You have to plan to for your schema to be built totally when it comes to the Glide columns in your server first before you connect it to Glide. However, you can just add any lookups, relations, queries, math, anything else with a computation. It can be attached to that SQL table. And the most, I think, easiest way to start with this, guys, as well, again, why I prefer is going with ChatGPT, talking to them, talking to the AI, whatever the AI you're using, is it Claudio, Bard, etc., Superhero, any AI will have the basics of writing a simple query, and it's going to be easier to understand, like explain to me why primary key as an example. So it's going to at least give you a little bit of hints why this is used, why the Postgres is using it, and it will explain step by step where you can build an app with SQL. From my point of view, my experience is going to take you 2 days. Setting up a server with Neon, understanding the standards, is going to be up on SQL in just 2 days. And then grow with Glide community. I'll prepare as much as I can the time to answer all of the questions on the community, and Andy, of course, and the team from Glide can answer as well from the support team. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Yasin. I think what you mentioned there at the end is an important call about learning SQL.
Yeah.
Just as a next step, if you're already familiar with Glide, if you're familiar with working with tables, using relations, building interfaces around that, you're part of the way there already. SQL is just the next step in learning how to work with structured data, how to work with databases, and it's just such a good core skill to have, and it opens up a lot of doors. So I'm definitely recommend that as a next step in general. Learn SQL deeply. It's a very powerful thing to have in your toolbox. All right, so we have a bunch of questions here that came in from registration, and then we have some questions here in the chat. We don't have a ton of time, but let's power through what we can power through. So first one here from Tyler. What SQL hosting provider do you recommend? Yasin, you mentioned Google Cloud. Any others? Any others that
Supabase, I think we're testing it so far. Just talking about, I recommended the most, no issues up until today, and we tested it in the alpha stage. Perfectly is Google, and Neon is doing fine as well. But there is Supabase. Supabase is well known as well in Flutter, and guys, you can play around. But I tested it out once. But it might be also helpful if you're used to it, or you have a database that is going to go there. Some other resources up until now, data sources not going to be easy for you, such as low-code databases, because not straightforward for the SQL. So I prefer always talking to the SQL servers directly, because Glide is talking to database without any kind of middle thing.
Perfect. Yeah. Another plus one for Supabase. I'm starting to do some more experimentation with Supabase as well. And we're just starting to do more with it as we play around with Glide. Next question here from Scott. Glide native computed columns versus SQL queries in terms of performance. Best practices on both. So we did mention that there are similar limitations to big tables. So for example, you can't build relations to computed columns or do roll-ups on computed columns. But you can write SQL queries to overcome those limitations. Yasin, I think you had some recommendations server side that you wanted to call out.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go to ChatGPT. I'm just going to say, hey, ChatGPT, hey, I have 2 tables that I want to connect as a relation. Give me an example. So what I do exactly is try to set up my relation and everything. Okay, I can see it took the users table as an example, and it created for me the example that I've done here, and it's gonna have a relation with a reference of the user ID. Okay, so if I ask it to create a view for me, create a view. So an easy way, if you want to go, just take this to Neon. Here you go, SQL editor. pasted one to the table is great. You can see. Just gonna go here, glide. So this is what I do exactly currently. I don't want to like say there's the same limitations with GPT. In SQL, I think you have extra space where you can play with your data better than GPT because you can overcome this from your server side. Once it's done from your side, you can just go and have it here as a read only and view it from the glide. So you can go do everything in the server and just come back. When it comes to security, so I love when Glide mentioned this many times, and I think Andy also mentioned it. Glide is not mirroring your data. So your data is always with you. It's always kept in your servers. Whatever you want to do with, because you're going to face a lot of companies that are going to ask you, hey, I don't want to have my data stored somewhere else. I need only to have access only to my developers and to my users. So I think SQL can do this for you as well. You don't have to, where's your servers, where's your data. You can export it at any time, play with it at any time, and you can have an audit log. Who's exactly adding and who's exactly removing anything.
That's a good distinction there. Just the fact that there are similar limitations on viewing and working with these two data sources within Glide regarding the computed columns, but the limitations aren't so much real with SQL in that same way because of all the other things that you can do with SQL as an external data source, like the things you can do in your SQL Server. Next question here from Gary, future possibility for reading local databases. If you have a self-hosted SQL Server, if it's accessible to the internet, you can connect to it. As long as it's exposed properly and configured properly, should be able to connect to it. There are currently no plans to connect to local network servers. So if you're running a server just exposed to your local network, from what I know, you're not able to connect to those servers. And then next question here from Matthew: examples of the best use case for SQL versus Glide tables or Glide big tables. Yasin, do you have a perspective on that?
I'll tell you, whenever I built, I always advise my developers and engineers in my team to use Glide tables into a smaller amount of data rows. We always use something called the drop-down tables. So example, this is a drop-down table as an example. We're using it in choices components. I always use, in this case, for smaller data amount, Glide tables, because it's fast, it's real time, and you don't have to like call your servers and come back. When it comes to data that you are expecting that is going to be growing up until even 5,000, just think of it. If you have like a 5,000 expectation of a row, then immediately go to SQL. You're going to tell me, hey, I'm still having 20,000 rows of a limitation. But no, not anymore, because whenever you add any kind of a row, you're going to need in the future, and you're going to have feature requests from your users. They're going to ask you to add some like, hey, can you add a comment section? Hey, can you like add an extra field with an extra something under it and so on? You're going to end up building a lot of tables under that table and growing by data. So you have to start with SQL so far. It's easier to start from scratch, and you're going to just play with it and see the limitation. So in Glide, if it's a simple users is not going to be always Glide tables. You're not going to be able to add any kind of sources other than the users. And I always use the users a perfect place where I can look up for the users row from anywhere else in the app. It's kind of the magic thing that I'm always using. I always store it in the row and then look it up and put it in SQL, in GPT, and so on. In GPT, I'm using it sometimes in comments, in attachments, like adding an attachment, uploading files, and so on. And in SQL, when it comes to analytics, when it comes to connecting the database with something else, then immediately I use SQL servers.
Nice. That's a perfect encapsulation. Great answer. Yes, agreeing with Matt here. Great answer. Thank you, Yasin. All right, final question here about the plan. So we've gotten a few questions about what plans SQL is available for. Well, right now SQL is in beta, and we are working with enterprise teams and enterprise plans right now. There was these larger teams that were asking about SQL as a data source, and they're the ones that we're building for at the moment. Now, if you're not on an enterprise plan and you would like to give SQL a try, maybe you're on a business plan, you can still get in touch with our team. Head over to glideapps.com/enterprise. You can get in touch through there and chat with the team, and we can see what we can do. If you are on an enterprise plan and you would like to get started, jump into the docs. We have a bunch of documentation on each of the different data sources, SQL, Postgres, SQL Server, Cloud SQL. Everything you need to know is in there, and we're continuing to work on those docs. And last but not least, any questions that you have about SQL Server, data sources in general, all the things, head over to the Glide community forum. We are going to have a recap thread of this session on there, covering some of the questions we weren't able to get to in this session. So if there's anything that you want to ask that we weren't able to get to, hit the forum, and we're happy to answer them there. Yasin, thank you again for jumping on today. That was an amazing demo. Would love to do something like this again with you. And to everyone who stuck around, appreciate it so much. We are at time. If you want to learn more about Voktech, head over to voktech.com. If you want to drop a link there in the chat, Yasin.
Right.
And that's it for today. That's it for us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm Andy Claremont, your head of community at Glide. This was Glide Next. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.